Wow, you beat me to it. Good morning, everybody. I love that. You guys are on it. It's because it's cold weather today, isn't it? You guys feel like it's like a new era, a new time? It's good to be here with you. Today, we wrap up this series called Hurts, Habits, and Hangups, where we've just been trying to acknowledge that there's these moments where you're going through life and everything's kind of clicking along, and then all of a sudden you get stuck someplace. Oftentimes it's in a hurt that maybe is from our past or something that's still kind of got a tether into us, or sometimes it's a habit where we find ourselves keep looping into the same path and thing, and it keeps us from moving forward in the way that we want to. Other times it's a hang up where there's just something that we're hung up on, and as much as we want to move past it, it just like keeps coming with us, and it slows us down and it gets us off course, or it pulls us back. We get stuck with these things. And so today, I have the privilege of talking about hangups. And rather than go, okay, so let's talk about this idea of hangups at large, I wanted to just narrow in on something that I think is highly relevant and specific to almost everybody. And if not everybody, I'm gonna be honest, part of me will be a little bit surprised. And it's the idea of trust. I think a lot of us can find ourselves at moments in our lives where we're hung up on trust, or if hung up on distrust, depending on which side of that you wanna look at, because that can be difficult, can't it? You know, a classic study conducted by the University of Virginia, this was like a landmark study, it still holds over time, found that the average person lies about once per day. Once per day. I know some of you guys are going like, that seems like a lot, or I haven't lied. Not me, or whatever that might mean. And this is when they were actually observing people and just trying to see what happens. This ranges from everything from outright deception and a lie where you fully are like, I'm lying right now, to perhaps a moment that some of you will have after church, where you go to a restaurant and you think your food's kind of okay, but then the waiter comes by and is like, how are you liking your food? And you're like, everything's great, thank you. And you lied, but you didn't really think it was about lying. Do you know what I mean? Like that type of deal. So it can range there. More recent research was conducted by Michigan State University, where they asked 1,000 people how often they lied and what those lies in fact actually were. Of the thousands, so now this is self-report. So I love this. It's on a survey about lying and you have to admit that you lied, right? Isn't that fun? So of the people that were surveyed in the self-report moment, where 59.9% of people claim to have not lied in the last 24 hours. So that means about 60% of us are like, well, I don't really lie very much. I haven't lied in the last day or so. That's kind of the thought process that would be there. But that also means that even when we're trying to be honest and we're self-reporting on these things, that about 40% of us fully admit that, no, we've lied in the last 24 hours, about 40% of the population. They were also able to identify 1,646 different lies that had been told in the last 24 hours. And of those various participants, 800 of those lies came from just 5.3% of the people, which does skew some of the data, but it also tells us that some people don't just lie, they lie a lot, right? And that this happens. The reason I reference all of this is because if I were to ask you to raise your hands, and I don't want you to raise your hands, but if I were to ask you to raise your hands and say, how many of you have ever been lied to before? This whole room would have their hands up in the air. You would. And if you don't, I'd say, how many of you don't know that you have been lied to? Like, we can add the rest of you. Do you know what I mean? Back into that. If I were to also ask the question, how many of you have lied to somebody else in your life? Every hand in this room is gonna go up. Isn't it crazy? Like, when we think about this, lying and experiencing some kind of deception or deceit is actually a pretty universal experience when it comes to being a human being. It is that commonplace, it is that regular, it's something that we all just become ingrained in or inoculated to. It's really fascinating when you think about it. And if I were to go a step further and say, and then keep your hands up if that person who is lied to, or you've ever had the person lie to you that was actually somebody who was very close to you, the majority of your hands would still be up in the air, if not all of you, because this happens. You know, the research actually showed that 53% of the lies that we tell people were to the people who are closest to us. And that those are often the biggest lies that we tell, because when there's deception or when there's hurt or whatever, we don't want to hurt the people that we care the most about. And so sometimes we lie to try to avoid it and prevent it. And it's part of what makes that common. This is really commonplace. And I know the way I'm talking right now, it sounds like I'm about to give you a message on lying. I'm not. But I wanted to reference this. If it's that common, if that experience is that common, then would it be really any wonder that so many of us would find ourselves hung up on the issue of trust from time to time? right? I wanted to illustrate this because I think this is something that's highly relevant to each of us. I think this is something that each of us will experience or someone will experience with us. And I just think it's something that's really important that we talk about. And so I'm grateful that we get the opportunity to do that here in the series today, because sometimes we get hung up on struggling to trust other people. That can be really, really difficult. And I hope we see a way forward. Today, as we go to talk about this, I want to look at a person from the book of Genesis, the very first book in the Bible. Last week, Glenn talked about a guy named Jacob, and today we're going to look at one of Jacob's sons, a guy named Joseph, right, that we get to read about in the book of Genesis. If you have your Bibles with you and you want to jump there, you can go to Genesis chapter 37 and hang out for a moment. But let me tell you all how Joseph's story begins. And by the way, his story spans 10, 11 chapters, something like that. And so I'm not going to have the ability to read all of it to you. I'm going to summarize some pieces as we go. So let me tell you the beginning of this story. So Joseph, he finds himself in this pretty great situation, actually. He is in a family that he loves and trusts, and they love and trust him more or less. Like, he's actually dad's favorite. Things are going great for him in that regard. If you've ever seen like Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, yes, it's that story, right? He's the guy who gets the fancy coat from dad because dad likes him a ton. Like, this is that Joseph. He's the favorite. So he has favor. He's got a family trust. Seems like everything's going great. And then Joseph has a dream. And he has this dream one night that his brothers and his father all bowed down in front of him. And Joseph wakes up. I don't know if this is like the arrogance of youth or he was just foolish or whatever, but he's like, I should tell my brothers and dad about that dream. That's a great idea. It's not. Any of you ever have that dream, don't tell people about it. It's not going to go great, right? So he goes and he tells them, and they're immediately like, who do you think you are? Or, he's like, hey, I had a dream last night. One day you guys are all going to bow down to me. Just a dream, And they get frustrated by this. Well, there comes a moment where his brothers are out tending to their flocks and they're kind of far away, tending the animals and things. And his dad says, hey, Joseph, go check on your brothers for me, which kind of sounds like go be a spy on your brothers. Go make sure they're doing what they're supposed to, and then come back and tell me how things are going. Genesis chapter 37, verse 18. They, his brothers, saw him from afar. And before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. That escalated quickly. Verse 19, they said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and let us throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what has become of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, which is one of his brothers, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, well, let us not take his life. Don't kill him, guys. And Reuben said, shed no blood, just throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand upon him. And Reuben's thinking that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. Verse 23 says, so when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, they take his clothing, the robe of many colors, this precious thing that his dad had given him. And they took him and threw him into a pit. And if that's not bad enough, the author wants us to know, and the pit was empty and there was no water in it. Essentially just going, it's not bad, it's terrible, right? This is a rough, awful situation. At the very beginning of Joseph's story is a moment where he is betrayed or deceived by the very people that he's supposed to trust the most. He experiences a moment of betrayal by the very people that are supposed to be for him and with him. These are his family. These are the people that he spends the most time with, that he would have been closest to. And this is where this moment of betrayal comes. And suddenly he goes from having a family where he's dad's favorite and everything's going great to being betrayed by his family and stuck in a pit. And can I ask you, would any of us blame Joseph if he suddenly developed some trust issues over this? No. None of us would look at him and be like, well, you need to do better, Joseph. We would look and go, no, Joseph, you've been through some pretty crazy things and you probably have some great reasons to struggle to trust some people. The people you trusted the most just kind of turned on you. And you got to hear them argue about whether they would kill you or not, and then they threw you in a pit. Like, this isn't going great for him. Friends, this is how this often happens with us too. See, the betrayal or lies we experience in our past often leave us with a sense of distrust in our future. They do. We experience a moment where all of a sudden something happens and it's a betrayal or it's deceit. And rather than it just staying in that moment, it becomes the story we tell with our lives. It becomes the path forward in our future. It starts to impact our other relationships and other moments. See, if you're here today and you in your heart of hearts knows that you kind of get hung up on trusting other people sometimes, if that becomes a struggle for you or that's a difficult thing for you, can I just tell you, it's probably because you have great reasons to not trust other people because of moments you've experienced in your life that have led you to have those reasons. You're probably not crazy It's probably not nonsense. You probably have walked through moments from time to time where you put yourself out there, and the hurt or the pain or the deceit or the deception that came from that particular moment instilled something in you where you found yourself saying, this isn't safe, and I don't know if I'm ready to keep doing this again. It's normal. In fact, with as often as we lie to one another from time to time, it's common. This is part of what so many people in the human experience have to share. Some of you know what it is to feel betrayed by your own family, and I think that's really hard, but it's also true. You know, growing up, your family is supposed to be the people who show you the most grace. They're supposed to be the people who show up for you, or the people who create a safe space for you to grow up and thrive in, or the people that you can be most vulnerable and most yourself around. But some of us know what it's like to grow up in a family where that was the opposite, where our house wasn't safe, and where we were lied to, or we were deceived, and the people who were supposed to show up for us didn't show up in ways. And so now we find ourselves trying to navigate life, and there's all of this stuff that feels like it's still with us, like we're hung up on, and we find ourselves hung up on trust. Some of us know what it's like to feel lied to or betrayed by a friend or a coworker. You know what's hard is initially you stepped into that relationship like pretty open, didn't you? With believing good things and feeling good about that. And then all of a sudden something happens and you don't really know where you stand anymore or how to stand. You're not sure to take one step forward or two steps back. You're not sure what to do with any of these pieces because it just gets really hard and you're hung up on trust. And the dynamic has changed and it's affecting your life. Some of us have been in romantic relationships where there was deceit or betrayal of some kind. And what makes it so hard is by nature of stepping into a romantic relationship, this is somebody that you were really caring about and somebody that you really were wanting to give part of your heart to and engage with. And that's what makes the betrayal or the deceit hurt so bad. That's what makes those moments so hard because you were wide open and you were vulnerable in a way that allowed you to get hurt. And now you find yourself saying, I want to close myself off. I don't want to engage that way in a relationship because if I let somebody really see me or really know me in this way, then they could actually hurt me. And I felt that before and I don't want to do it again. So I'm shutting the whole thing down because you know what it is to get hung up on trust. And I also think some of us know what it is to get blamed for something we didn't do, but then have to live out of that. Right? Some of us know what it is or what it's like to have someone else's lie become our reality that we now have to live. And that becomes difficult. And the hurt and the anger and the fear, they take root in our heart and they start just closing us off because there's just so many things we're hung up on because we just struggle to trust it. Trust is hard. Really normal. As hard as it is to talk about this, it's really common amongst all of us. But it is hard. You know, I want to share a story with you about someone that gave me permission to share their story. And I say that because there's a lot of vulnerable things that I'm going to share in regard to this story. But they experienced this firsthand. They got to walk through this same dynamic. A while back, I had the privilege of sitting down with a gentleman who wanted to share his story with me. And so I said, okay. And he starts talking about how he grew up with this really, and the word I'll use is like idyllic childhood. He described it, he's like, my parents were awesome. Everybody loved them. Like they were all my friends' favorite people, like that type of thing. And everybody always wanted to be at my house. And I loved my family. And we were like should have been a television show of just like, it's all kind of cookie cutter and it felt pretty amazing. And that's how he described the family that he grew up in. And he did great in school and he had lots of friends and he was athletic and he had all of these things going and his family was all great and they had family dinners all the time and all, like that whole type of picture. And he goes, I had all of that. And he goes, and I went to school one day and I came home and it's like upon returning home from school, I stepped into my house and it was like a completely different household than I'd ever seen or known in an instant. Because when he got home, what he realized is that one of his parents had an affair. And this had all come to light in a moment. And on top of that, the person that they'd had the affair with was somebody that everybody in the family knew really, really well, including him. And so it just became like this idea of like, how could that happen? How did I not see this? Like, what was going on? You know, to make matters harder, his parents began to tell him all kinds of things about the situation that he had no business knowing as a kid. And so he becomes privy to all of this stuff that was happening. And he starts to realize things hadn't been okay for some time. He was just blind to it. He didn't actually get to see it. And so he looked and he said, I went to bed one night with what was, I really thought, an amazing life that was full of opportunity. And he said, I woke up the next morning and realized it was all just a dream and there was a harsh reality sitting in front of me. And he said, I felt embarrassed. I felt dumb. I felt lied to. Because how did I not see this? And I just ignorantly had trusted everything. And then he made this statement to me amidst all the hurt and the confusion. He said, in that moment when that occurred, I just decided to myself once and for all that I never wanted to be blindly ignorant ever again. It was like a commitment he was making to himself in that moment. And I didn't look at him and say, well, how dare you? Or, you really should be a better person or any of those things. I looked at him and I was like, well, how could you not? In that particular instance, right, I don't blame him. I looked at him and I said, it'd be hard to trust anybody after that moment. It'd be hard to trust what you know and what you don't. Your world would be upside down. You'd be so confused. He said that after that, he began to be less close to many of the friends around him. He began to be less close to his family. He began to retreat and withdraw. He pulled away from so many of these things. And it's because all of those places didn't feel safe anymore. Because they all seemed like places where maybe he would get hurt in a way that he didn't see coming, or maybe it wasn't going to be true, or maybe something was going to, flip upside down again or something, and he just couldn't trust people. When he dated someone, the moment they would express feelings for him, like, I really like you and I actually want to spend more time with you and I want a real relationship with you, he'd be like, we should break up. And he'd say that because he's like, because the moment that happened, it was like, I'm now going to get close enough to this person where they could deceive me or lie to me or something. And I don't want to ever go through that. I don't want to be blindly ignorant ever again. And so he closed himself off to trust, because isn't that how trust works sometimes for us? It's not that it's just like, well, that moment happened, so I dialed it back a little. It's like that moment happened, so I just turned off the valve. And I armored up and I protected myself. And I just thought, this is what we need to do. And I looked at him and recognized, he had good reasons to be hung up on trust, didn't he? Which of us will go to him and be like, well, you just need to shape up and put your best foot forward. You'd be like, no, that is awful. That's really hard. I wouldn't blame you for not trusting somebody after this. And he started to describe feeling stuck in his life. And I think some of us know what that's like, where these moments keep us stuck here. Joseph is stuck in a pit when we last left his story, but his story doesn't end there. He's stuck in a real pit. He's also probably stuck in a pit of distrust when it comes to his brothers and things. His brothers come back and they decide, you know what, we're not going to leave you for dead. We're going to sell you into slavery. I don't think that's better. And they do, though. They sell him into essentially to slave traders who take him to Egypt, where he's probably procured or purchased, however this would have gone, by a guy named Potiphar, who was a well-to-do person in Egypt. He was the captain of the Egyptian guard, a well-to-do individual. And so Joseph now is a slave in Potiphar's household. And this is what we read about this. Genesis chapter 39, verse 2 says, the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. And his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. And so Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he, Potiphar, made him, Joseph, overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. Isn't that crazy? I read this and I find myself thinking, way to go, Joseph, right? I do, because that guy just went from being betrayed by his family, the people he loved and trusted the most, to being this horrible situation where he was left in a pit to die and then sold off into slavery. It feels like that story ends there, doesn't it? But it doesn't. He finds himself in a really bad situation that's really hard, and he's just trying. And in his trying, something good begins to happen. It's almost like he's left this behind and he's moving forward. And even in this really unfortunate situation in Egypt, he's building a comeback story. That's what it feels like, doesn't it? Because he's rising in this household, and he's now been entrusted with all the running of the whole house, and his master, the guy who runs this house, Potiphar, he's basically said, Joseph, you're the guy I trust the most. And I'm leveraging you, and I want you to help me and all these things. So Joseph gets this amazing kind of privilege, even in this pretty terrible situation and terrible story. I'm like, that's a comeback story. But if you know Joseph's story, you know it doesn't end there, right? And if you don't, what ends up happening is Potiphar's wife takes a liking to Joseph. She begins to notice him, and so she tries to seduce him on multiple occasions, and he refuses. I kind of wonder if when he refuses, right? The Bible says, I don't want to sin against my master. I don't want to sin against God. I also wonder if Joseph would have looked and said, I know what deceit feels like. I know what it's like to be deceived and to be betrayed in that way. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be the same person in somebody else's life. And so he doesn't, but we read this, Genesis chapter 39, verse 11. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house, she, Potiphar's wife, caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and he fled and he got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that, I lifted up my voice and cried out. He left his garment beside me. He fled. He got out of the house." She basically says, it wasn't me, it was him. And he was inappropriate and he was going to abuse me. And all he says like horrible things, and everybody believes her. And he repeats the same lie to Potiphar when he gets home. Friends, if I am Joseph, do you know what I'm thinking in that moment? Probably what you'd think too. I can't believe this is happening to me again. Like, yeah, I was one thing with my family and the people I was closest to, but I left that life behind and I'm trying to build a better life here and I'm trying to take a step forward and I'm trying to do this. And now it's with the person I work for and everybody I work with, and they all believe the lie and not me. And he's betrayed once again. You know, if I was Joseph, I might have thought, I've never been anything and honest but and true for Potiphar, and I've served him. And maybe when he gets home and he hears this whole thing, he's going to think, no, Joseph's not a liar. And we're going to get to sit down and have a real conversation, but that's not what ultimately happens. Potiphar gets home and he's angry and frustrated and he throws Joseph into prison where he's basically left there. This is how he's supposed to end up. And you know what's so hard about these moments is this becomes the moment where if you're Joseph in that situation, what do you find yourself thinking in your head? This isn't the first time this has happened to me. This is the second time. And then this one sentence pops up in our heads that is actually really damaging, but we say it all the time. And it's, I should have known better. Because all of a sudden it's not just shame on her. It's what? Shame on me. I should have known better. Friends, sometimes the hardest part with trust isn't the first time our trust is broken. Sometimes the hardest part is when we open ourselves back up to hope only to be hurt again. And all of a sudden it becomes like this felt nail in a coffin to us. And the reason why is because that phrase pops in our head. It's not just that a bad thing happened to us. We start to own it differently and we start to tell ourselves things like, I should have known better and I never want to not know again. And we start to lock ourselves down and we close ourselves up and we build up all that armor and we shut relationships and people out because we got to keep them at bay because they could hurt us. You know, back to the story I was telling you. It was several years after the gentleman discovered his parents' marriage had basically come apart and imploded. He found himself saying, I never want to be blindly ignorant again, right? And he started to live, but he's just kind of having a hard time. Like he knew this, that he didn't like the way life felt. He wished something would be different. And then all of a sudden he met somebody. He described it to me. He said, during this time I met somebody and there was like this instant bond and he was like, I wasn't looking for it. I didn't think this was going to happen. And there's just this like instant bond. And it's because they'd been hurt too. They'd been betrayed too. And they knew what it was like. And like we understood each other in this way and we started to bond over these things and it just drew us in and we would talk about this. And she was struggling with trust and I was struggling with trust and each of us wanted something different for our lives and we wanted to do this differently together. And he's like, and it was just good. And he said, he's like, I just remember the season of time. I was so happy. And I really felt like, okay, whatever life I had, that I've left it. And now I'm moving into something better. I'm doing something different. I'm making my way forward. It was a year and a half into the relationship that he went to her and he's just smitten and he looks at her and he basically says, I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And in that moment, her eyes got really wide and she took a few steps back and she looks at him and says, I want to break up. And he's blindsided. He has no idea why this happened and he didn't see this coming. And it's like he is on another planet or something. And he looks at her and he goes, why? And she says, there's someone else. And all of a sudden, all of the hurt and all of the pain and all the things that had happened at one point in his life come flooding back into the midst of his present moments. And he finds himself saying, see, this is why I said I never want to be blindly ignorant again, except this time it's not just because of them. This time he says, and shame on me because I should have known better. And now it wasn't just that the armor was quietly on there, it was fully on there. And he began to lock his life up and lock his life down in such a way that he closed himself off to relationships. And he started to become the cynic. See, friends, sometimes our hangups with trust come not from the first time where we were hurt, although that's hard, and they come from there too, sure. But sometimes the hardest moment is actually the second time when we judge ourselves because we believe we should have known better. And just like my friend, just like it would have been for Joseph, in those moments, it's easy to shut down, isn't it? It's easy to become the cynic. It's easy to close ourselves off to others because we want to protect ourselves. We don't want to feel stupid. Nobody does. Nobody wants to feel betrayed. Nobody wants to feel that ever again. We don't want to be hurt by people we care about. We don't want to be harmed by people that we let in. And this gets really difficult because when you're hung up on trust, right, you can end up pushing away the people in your life that you need the most. Isn't that the hard part about it? When you're hung up on trust, you need people. We need people. It's not good for man to be alone. Like, this is true. We need to be seen and known by somebody else in our life. And just like we understand God sees and knows us, like we need that relationship with people, but we start to close ourselves off from the people we need the most when we're hung up on trust. When you're hung up on trust, you experience being in a world where you feel like nobody truly knows you, nobody truly sees you, but it's also because you don't want anybody to truly know you and you don't give anybody the chance to truly see you because if they do, they'll hurt you. And so you feel lonely, and that loneliness is hard to carry, isn't it? When you're hung up on trust, what ends up happening is you end up judging and defining the people in your presence by the mistakes someone else made in your past. And you actually end up hurting them in ways that make them struggle to trust you too. And we actually start to create a cycle and repeat that in the lives of other people too. It's hard, isn't it? What do we do with this? If this is a common experience for us to feel deceived and betrayed because of the frequency of lying and how these things work, if this is something many of us in this room actually know and experience, but we find ourselves stuck in the cycle, what do we do? And I gotta be honest, it feels like quite the conundrum sometimes, doesn't it? Because you're faced with these two decisions. It's like, well, I guess I can trust people who might hurt me only to potentially get hurt again, or I can close myself off from people who might hurt me in a way that makes me lonely and actually ends up hurting them. What do I do? Neither one of those sound like great options, right? Like if that was a sales pitch to you, you're like, so which one do you want to buy? And the answer is neither. It's a terrible store. Right? It's hard, but this is the thing we get trapped in. This is why we get stuck here and we keep looping, and this becomes our hang up. Distrust becomes so hard to let go of. I want to turn a corner in the morning here, and I want to turn a corner in Joseph's story. I want to turn a corner in my friend's story because something different begins to happen in each of these. You actually see this, you get to see this really amazing moment at the end of Joseph's story where he gets the opportunity to either enact vengeance or do something different. And I think what we see out of it is just beautiful. And I want to unpack that and point to some things that hopefully become wisdom to help us move forward if you find yourself hung up there. And you get to see some of this in my friend's stories. I want to summarize that as well. But let's start with Joseph's story because there's a moment at the end that I want to look at. So again, it's like 12 chapters. So let me summarize a piece to get us there. Joseph ends up getting thrown in prison and he spends a decent amount of time in prison. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, he has this dream at one point and he feels like this is an important dream and it has meaning, but nobody's able to interpret it for him. Somebody's like, hey, there's a guy in prison named Joseph. He can interpret your dream. And so Pharaoh brings Joseph in front of him and Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream. God partners with him and this amazing thing happens. And all of a sudden Pharaoh realizes there's gonna be famine on the land because that's what Joseph tells him. He's like, Pharaoh, there's gonna be famine that's coming, not just to Egypt, but to the surrounding land. And if you don't start making the plan now, you're not gonna weather it when it gets here. And Pharaoh has this awareness where he's like, Joseph is wise and God seems like he's with him and this is powerful. And so he goes, so Joseph, you're in charge of the plan. And all of a sudden Joseph gets taken from being in prison to becoming the second most influential person in the nation of Egypt outside of Pharaoh himself as Pharaoh entrusts the entire thing to him. And again, it starts to feel like this amazing comeback story. And sure enough, the famine happens. Right? This famine happens and people don't have food and they're wondering where their meals are going to come from. But do you know who does well? Egypt. Do you know why? Because Joseph walks this plan out and they have storehouses that they filled with grain and they're rationing this thing out. And so when other surrounding like tribes and people end up running out of food, where do they go to get it? Egypt, because Egypt has storehouses, because they've been planning for this because of Joseph. And do you know who runs out of food and who suddenly finds himself going to Joseph himself to say, we need your help because we don't have anything to eat? His brothers, his family, the people that the last time he saw him left him in a pit for dead and then sold him to slave traders and altered the course of his entire life, those people. And they're now before him, except this time the dynamics have changed and Joseph is the most powerful person in the room and they're in front of him seeking aid. This is a huge moment. And can I just pause us really quick? Ask yourself, if you're Joseph and that moment happens to you and you've experienced everything he's experienced, what do you do right there? Right? You drop the hammer. Or at the very least, you're like, sorry, fend for yourselves. And you kick them out and you send them away. Joseph does something really different. I think it's beautiful. And I think it offers us wisdom for those of us who are hung up on distrust today. So let me start to unpack that. Genesis chapter 42, verse 18. On the third day, Joseph said to them, so his brothers are gathered before him, and Joseph is kind of weird about this. They don't know that it's Joseph at this point because they haven't seen him in forever. They don't recognize him. And they're now standing in front of him and he's having this exchange. It says, on the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live. Remember, he holds all the power. For I fear God. If you're honest men, do you think he believes that they're honest men? Probably not. If you're honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and then let the rest go, carry the grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me. Joseph had a brother he had yet to meet. His name was Benjamin. And he says, so then your words will be verified. This is how I know that you're trustworthy and honest, and you shall not die. And it says, and they did so. Joseph is testing them. And we actually see this occur over several chapters where he just kind of keeps kind of testing the waters with them. And they don't even know it's him, but he's uneasy right here. And this brings me to the very first piece of wisdom that I think we can hold today. And I hope it becomes a challenge or a roadmap for us who struggle or are hung up on distrust. And it's this. Friends, you get to decide the reasonable level of trust to give away. And I want to say that again because I really want some of you to hear me when I say this. You get to decide the reasonable level of trust that you would like to give away to each person in your life. You do. This is so important because when it comes to trusting others, it often feels like it's an all or nothing moment for us, doesn't it? So this is why we think of it of like, I was betrayed at one point in time, so then I just turned the valve of trust off in my life and I shut this whole thing down. Because it's either on or it's off. This is how we often approach this, but it's not actually an all or nothing game. Joseph in this moment doesn't look at his brothers who absolutely betrayed him and they're like, I don't trust you at all. Get out of here. I'm not talking to you. I close it off. Or I'm gonna like enact vengeance on you. This is gonna be terrible and just bring the hammer down. He also doesn't look at them and say, it's fine, I'm fine, everything's fine. It's not on, it's not off, right? What does he do? If he did either of those other things, would we look at him and go, yeah, that seems wise. You should just trust them fully, Joseph. We wouldn't look at that and be like, that seems wise. You'd look and be like, are you serious right now? Like you need a better friend in your life. You need somebody who like talks, like speaks some truth to you. Like this seems not okay, Joseph. We would say that doesn't even feel reasonable. But what does he do? Joseph keeps his identity hidden. And like I said, for several chapters, he tests them little by little to determine the reasonable level of trust that he's gonna engage this and engage them with. And this is so key for us. We often see this, like I said, it's either on or off, but each moment, each person is a moment where we get to decide based on the interaction that I have with this person, based off the history I have with this person, based off what I know, what is the appropriate level of trust that I wanna give them? And you get to do that. Right? Instead of seeing trust in your life like this on and off switch, you get to decide how much trust is appropriate. So think of it this way. If someone lies to you all the time, if you have someone in your life that has lied to you all of the time, I don't want you to hear me right now being like, and what God wants you to do is just trust them because that's what a good person does. No, I would actually look and say that feels unwise and unreasonable. And that you get to decide the appropriate level of trust that you're gonna give that person based on what is real and true in your life. You do. If you're in a relationship where you are being abused or you're being hurt, I think I need to be really clear in telling you that this message is in no way, shape, or form designed to tell anybody that is in an abusive relationship of any kind that your job is to be a better person and learn to trust that person. I want you to hear me really clearly, you get to decide the appropriate level of trust that you want to give to that person based on whatever your experience and whatever has happened and whatever those things are. But then here's what you also get to do. When you step away from that relationship and you find yourself interacting with the next person, you get to do it all over again. And what you're gonna find is it's not an all or nothing game. There are some people that you have in your life that you can give a really high level of trust to because it is wise and because you need people that can know you and see you and have relationship with you. And you're gonna find that there's some people in your life that for a series of reasons and circumstances, that level is gonna be a lot lower. And that's okay. You get to engage that. You get to test that. You get to honestly walk through that, and that is okay. It's not an all or nothing game. But here's what's gonna happen if you try to do that. You're gonna feel some things. You are. Because if you've closed yourself off from trust and you try to open yourself up to trust a few more people, it's scary, isn't it? And you start to feel some things that maybe some of us have been hiding from, which brings me to point number 2 here, and it's this. You get to feel the honesty of what you really feel. I wasn't gonna put this in here because it can sound obvious, but I recognize it's actually not obvious. And that some of us actually need to hear this. You get to feel the honesty of what it is that you really feel. And we see this not once, but twice with Joseph. Genesis chapter 42, verse 21 says, then they said to one another, this is his brothers, right? They still don't know that this is Joseph. They said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us. We did not listen. And that is why this distress has now come upon us. And then Reuben, his brother, answered again, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy, but you didn't listen? So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. And he's saying, we deserve this, guys. And they're saying, we're afraid that we're being punished for this. Verse 23, they did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Joseph is standing there for this conversation, you guys. And he's hearing all of these words. And they don't realize that he understands every word of what they're saying. And he hears his brothers, who the last time he saw them, sold him into slavery after harming him in that way. He hears his brothers articulate that they have done wrong and that it wasn't okay and that they're fearful about all of this, and it is undoing for him. What does it say at the very end of this passage, verse 24? Then he turned away from them and he wept. Because the honest truth is, all these years later, Joseph is still hurt. When you've experienced deceit or betrayal or a moment like this that has caused you to just rock what it is to trust people, you've got hurt here. You've got pain here. And it's an honest thing. And the truth of the matter is if you try to hide that down and suppress that in, you just become a cage for it. And you never get to release it. And it'll rob you of relationships, because if you get in a real relationship where you feel real things, you might feel that. And so there's something about, in the honesty of it, just going, if I want to trust some people, I get to decide the appropriate level of trust that I'm going to give away. And I know that the moment I'm going to give some of that trust away, it'll be a little scary for me. It's going to be a little hard for me, and I'm going to feel some things, and it is okay to feel those things. In fact, because it's honest, in fact, if you go to feel that, and as you honestly go to feel that, you think about this idea of like, I don't want to be a cage for those things. I want to release those things so that I can heal, so that I can move forward. What you'll find is that it's not just honest, it can actually be healing too. When his brothers return, so he weeps, right? And by the way, he weeps, and do you know what he does after that? The story pivots just a pinch. Joseph looks and he says, go and fill their bags of grain, fill them up. And don't take money from them. Make sure whatever money they brought, that their bags are full of money too when they go to leave. They still don't know he's Joseph. He's still testing this out, but all of a sudden what begins to change in Joseph's heart? There's a sense of compassion that comes to life, isn't there? There's a sense of, there's something starting to shift here, and you see this. There's something about it that becomes healing. Then his brothers return. They bring his youngest brother, Benjamin, and Joseph sees his brother that he's never met for the very first time. And upon looking at him, he feels so overwhelmed by it that it literally says he's overcome with emotion. He has to run away to weep, and he weeps so profusely that it says that he had to clean his face before coming back so that he could be presentable, like to meet, engage with his brothers once again. Isn't that the hard part about hurt sometimes, is it hits you once and you think you're done with it, and you're like, cool, I did that now. And then you have another moment where it hits you again, and you get to express it out and release it out then too. But again, we see the similar pattern. When he returns back to the room with his brothers, you know what he does? He feeds all of them. He throws them a feast, and he gives his youngest brother a 5-fold portion because he wants to bless him. You see this thing starting to be released. He's letting go of some of the hardness and pieces as he's testing this out based on what is appropriate, feeling what he needs to feel. And then this gets to the third piece here, friends. And I think for me, I think this might be the most important thing that I would share with you this morning. And it's this: you get to decide who you want to be. In this situation, you get to decide who you want to be. Not based on who somebody else is or what somebody else has done, but on who you want to be. When the story of Joseph concludes, he ends up getting to see his father Jacob one last time, and then Jacob dies, and Joseph goes to help bury him, and all of a sudden his brothers freak out. And his brother, and I didn't thought about it. It didn't really make sense to me when I first read it. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense when you really think about it. His brothers thought the only reason Joseph was not bringing down the hammer, not enacting vengeance, not doing all of this stuff, is they thought the only reason that was happening was because dad was alive and he's trying to honor dad. And now that dad has passed away, he's like, there's no one left to honor. We're gonna get the real Joseph is about to come out and lay the smack down. Like, this is gonna happen. The real Joseph is about to judge us in a pretty hard way. And so they go before him. They're scared and they fall down before him and they bow down before him, just like his dream in the beginning of his story. And they basically are at his mercy. Genesis 50, chapter 19, it says, but Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? Is it my job to be the judge and arbiter of justice in your life? It's not. I'm not God. Verse 20, as for you, I love this verse. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. And thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. This is such a powerful moment, and I'm so glad we get to read it thousands of years later. What's he saying? He goes, look, this moment where you guys tried to steal the story, and you used your life to tell a story of deceit and betrayal, that was like a sentence in the grand story that is God's larger story, where he's working all things together for the good of those who know him. What you intended for evil, God actually, that's like a sentence in this larger chapter that God has been writing about the good that he's trying to wield and do. And the other thing, you can kind of see this. Joseph essentially looks at his brothers and says, the betrayal and the deceit that you chose isn't the whole story, right? That's what he's saying. And what I love is it's almost like he's saying, the story of broken trust you chose to tell with your life doesn't get to become the story I tell with mine. Because what so often happens is we go, I experienced a moment where I was betrayed or I was deceived. And then because of a moment that happened to us that somebody else tried to tell with their story, we adopt it as who we are and it becomes our story. And what I love about Joseph, what he's doing here is he's like, look, that was your story. That's the thing that you told. That has a real impact on me. That is a real moment in my life, but I'm choosing to tell a different story with mine now. Because there's a difference between being a person who's gone through a moment of betrayal and distrust to becoming an untrusting person as your story. You get to choose and decide who you want to be. Does it mean Joseph just walks around blindly trusting everyone? Well, no, you get to see it. He's testing the waters and trying to figure this out and what's appropriate. Does it mean that he didn't hurt and that everything's fine? No, and you get to see that too. He's struggling and there's pain and there's impact and it still hits now and then, but there's a larger story that he chooses to tell with his own life as he partners with God to do it. And I think that is a beautiful, beautiful moment, and I'm grateful we get to hear it. As I sat listening to that gentleman who had gone through not one, but two really big moments of betrayal and two really big moments of deceit, these became like this massive disruption in his life, but I got to talk with him after I already knew him, and I knew that he was married, and I knew that he had kids, and I knew that his kids loved him, and that I saw him with his children, his heart was wide open for them. And I saw him with his wife, and I saw vulnerability, and I saw honesty and intimacy, and all the pieces that just exist in that beautiful kind of relationship. And so I looked at him and I was like, so can I just tell you, the you that you're describing and the story that you've gone through here, I just see somebody so different. How is it that you now are wide open, your heart's wide open with your kids and your heart's wide open for your wife, and all these pieces are happening when you're the person who is never wanting to be blindly ignorant again, and now you're engaging things like vulnerability and intimacy and candidness and honesty, and you're close and all the things that should scare you to death based on your life. And he looked at me and he said, after that second time, when I said, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and I found out that there was somebody else there, and my life just came to pieces, he said, and I really decided I'm done trusting. And he goes, and I just did, I locked it down. I lived a life of distrust. He said, I went fully Darwinistic, where it was just, this is a dog-eat-dog world. You can't trust anybody. Everybody's just trying to survive. This is how we live, And this is how he did live. He cut himself off from relationships, from family, from people, from things. And he said he did this for a decade, for 10 years of his life, and that he was just miserable and hurting. And that it wasn't creating a life. It felt like it was robbing him of a life. And so he finally got to a spot where he was like, I wasn't okay, and I knew I needed some help, and I finally reached out to somebody to get a little bit of help. And he goes, I started to process and talk through some of these things and be honest about what this really was. And I began to heal, little by little, moment by moment. And he said, that, and this is my favorite thing, and this is what created this message in all honesty. He said, at some point I decided that the difficult moments in my past weren't the story I wanted to keep telling with my future. And that ultimately the only person paying the price for what had happened to him was him, and that he was done paying for it because he wanted to start choosing to live and to trust and to have relationship as he opened himself back up to relationship with people little by little again. Friends, most of us have good reasons to have trust issues. The question is, do you want to keep them? It's not your fault that you have trust issues. It's not your fault that you've had a moment where you've been betrayed. We have good reasons to hold on to those things. The question is do you want to keep them? You know, you may have had a moment where somebody broke your trust, but you get to decide if that's going to make you an untrusting person. Or you get to meet each person and decide what the appropriate level of trust is that you actually want to give away. With courage and honesty, knowing that God is with you, you get to face the fact that there's some hurt here and there's some things, but I can express that and release that so I don't have to become a cage for it, and it doesn't have to hold me back in relationship. And I get to choose the story that I want to tell with my life, knowing that whatever has happened to me is a moment in my past, not who I am, because I get to partner with God to choose the story I want to tell. And all of that is in front of you. And I know there are those of us in this room who struggle with this trust. And my heart and my prayer for you is that you would know that there is a God who is with you. You know, the whole reason we did this series was just knowing there's complexity in this room. There's hard moments here. You are fully loved by the God of the universe unconditionally. God is absolutely with you, and he favors you, and we call that grace. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And in the hardest of moments, he wants to walk this with you. He hurts for you. He hurts alongside you. And he works all things together for the good of those who know him. And so the worship band has made their way back out. And just as a blessing to you all, they wanted to close out this series with a song just to minister to everybody. And so I'd love to just pray as they go to sing. God, we come before you, and we thank you, Lord, that you're with us. I recognize, God, that there's probably some hurts in this room. I recognize that there's probably some difficulties, and I recognize that this topic today is hard. So Lord, I just pray above and beyond right now that each person here would know how loved by you they are. That each person here would know that they have your favor, that you look upon them with love, that you like them, that you're with them. God, I pray for courage and honesty to face the things that are ours to face. I pray for patience and understanding to give ourselves the time to walk through moments that are difficult. And I pray that you open our eyes to the relationships and the people that are there in our lives so that we don't have to walk this life alone. We love you and we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.
believe you're working all things for my good. You're working all things for my good.
I want to say thank you for joining us today. You are loved. And can I also invite you to two things? One, if this series has stirred some things in you and you're like, I just need somebody to pray for me, we'd love to pray for you. There's a group of amazing people over here in the prayer place, and they're there for that very reason, that they would see it as an honor and a privilege to even just be able to pray with you and for you. And so if that's something you need in your life, I'd encourage you to make your way over there. Also, if you're new, I'd love to meet you. It's awesome to have you here. And so I'm gonna be over in this little area right here called the Connect area, and just love to shake your hand and say thank you for coming. It's awesome to have you guys here. So to all of you, have a great week. Enjoy the cool.